So Jim, I had this little thing when I was doing Boston radio. I used to tell people, and God bless Kevin Harlan for not really coming in and being a fact checker. I used to tell people, Kevin Harlan is my best friend. We're best friends. That's my best friend on the radio. We go way back. And Kevin never came in and said, no, that's not true. Kevin, man, it's good to see you. It is good to hear you. What's going on?
Michael and Jim, what a pleasure to be on with you. Thank you. Everything is great. My wife and I are up here on the shores of Lake Michigan, where it is probably going to snow, but it's raining hard now, and it's about 48 degrees. And I'm going to make my way to Cleveland here in a couple of days and go see the Browns and Patriots, and then out to L.A. to do the Monday night game. And then the NBA season starts next week. And we'll be in Golden State on Tuesday and Clippers-Lakers on Thursday for TNT. So a good little section of broadcasting coming up, and I can't wait to get out there.
And, we got a lot to talk to you about then, based on where you're going. I just wanted to say, though, if you could just give us a sense, because we've had this conversation before, Kevin, where I've said to you, look, most of the time, if you're in the car, you're probably on your way somewhere and you'd rather be watching the game. But if you're listening to the game, you make it so visual. And just that clip there, that Malcolm Butler interception, as we could see it, we heard your call. Hey, Marshawn Lynch flank to the left. You got wideouts here. Here it is, Russell Wilson in the shotgun. You really can see the game. When did you start taking that approach? Because, as you said, you've got a TV gig too, where the pictures are there for you, whether it's basketball or football. When did you start taking that approach on the radio?
Well, probably when I started in radio when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I always was enamored with some of the great voices I'd hear on radio. Jack Buck on Monday Night Football on CBS, and Jim Durham in Chicago doing the Chicago Bulls, and Joe Tate in Cleveland doing the Cavaliers. And their word pictures to me were so vivid. And I'd go to sleep every night knowing that I could see the exact kind of jump shot being taken, or the kind of run by a back or a catch by a receiver, just by their words. And that really resonated with me. And I felt like, if I ever do anything in the business, I think that's the style I'd like to copy. So I worked at that. And broadcasting radio, it probably is the purest form of broadcasting from a play-by-play perspective, because the voice, your reporting skills, all the different things that you use to convey what's going on are in, play. Whereas on television, I could just say Lynch on 2nd and 10 for 5 and tackled by Jones. He's to the 35. You can see it. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then that it doesn't need anything else except just accentuate maybe a note or something like that, and certainly lean on the analyst. But on radio, it's so challenging. I'm far more exhausted doing a game on Monday night than I am doing a game on Sunday afternoon.
Kevin, can I ask this? First of all, it's a pleasure to be on with you.
Same
but
here,
I wanted
Jim,
to ask you bring. I said this to Michael. You and Gus Johnson bring this enthusiasm to a game that not all broadcasters bring. And maybe this is a little inside football or inside broadcasting, but how do you determine how much emotion and excitement you want to bring versus the responsibilities of the job, if you will? Because I would imagine there's a fine line.
Yeah, that's a great broadcasting question. And not to get too into the weeds, but I don't think any of us, whether it's me or Sean McDonough or Jim Nance or Al or whoever else is doing a game, thinks about that in particular. But I think you always know that if you kind of lose yourself in the game, if you're really focused in and, on top of personnel decisions and different swings in the game, trends in the game, that you kind of have to let your inner, whatever that is, come through, and you've got to trust your gut or trust your heart and trust your eyes. And so I never go into a game thinking, man, I can't let this baby rip with LeBron, going up against whoever. And you just, if the play needs that kind of call, then I guess I just let the fan in me speak out. Now, there's always that debate about what happens if James or somebody makes a terrific play in the first quarter, making it a 10-7 game, as opposed to the fourth quarter. Well, clearly in the body of the game, it's different. But a great play to me is a great play. And I always think of Ray Rice a couple years ago in a playoff game against the Pats in New England. The first play of the game, Flacco hands off to Rice, and he busts free and gallops for the opening game touchdown, and it was over after that. And who's not going to get excited for a play like that? Or when LeBron James comes up with a mammoth dunk where he has climbed the ladder and gone over a defender and puts it down. That, to me, is part about, the fan coming out and the broadcaster. I would like to think that people look at broadcasters not as robots, but as fans first and foremost. And I know the two of you are, just by reading what you've written over the years, and know how much you appreciate what you cover and the different nuances to every story. And I think that's how it is with broadcasting. I think you just kind of let the moment take you, get lost in the game, so to speak, and let that be your guide. Now, there are some games which are not exciting, and people say, boy, so-and-so sounded down, or what wasn't into it. But it's the game dictates, I think, how we all sound, at least for me it does. But I appreciate your kind comments, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I get that. I guess I've just got to be true to myself, and I enjoy the games. I've been brought up in sports. My dad was in professional sports with the Cardinals and the Packers, and before that with Marquette and Al McGuire. So I've been around it my whole life, and I'm such a fan, and know the diligence it takes and the hours that are going into every play, every shot, every throw. And when you have that kind of appreciation, you know how big a deal it is when a big pass is completed, regardless of when it happens in the body of the game.
You talk about your enthusiasm, and it's a great answer, your enthusiasm and your fandom. You've got a football game to go to in Cleveland, then you got basketball on the West Coast. So tell us about football. What is getting you excited in this early stage of the NFL season? We're in mid-October. Based on what you've seen and what you've covered, is there a trend, or is there an individual that has you looking at the game saying, man, this is pretty cool?
Well, we had Miami for those two games, one against Baltimore where they came back in the fourth quarter with Tua, and then the next week when they played Buffalo and beat the Bills in Miami, and with a new coach, and supposedly these great skilled players around him. What now could Tagovailoa do? And he answered, and they started 3-0 until he was injured. So clearly the concussion story has resonated, because we covered it when he was hit in Miami by the Bills. And that has been a story that I think, and then this past weekend we were in New York with the Jets and Finns, and Teddy Bridgewater on the first snap of the game, of all teams, Miami, gets hit, and he's yanked out with the new concussion protocol that is being employed by players in the league. So the Miami thing has been pretty exciting early on. I'm always mesmerized by Mahomes and what he does. I kind of thought that the Raiders and Chargers would be better. They had fortified their teams a little bit. One team with offense and Adams, and the other with a nice defensive end to Joey Bosa, who's now out for the Chargers. What Jalen Hurts has done, we've already covered a Philadelphia game on Monday Night Football, and he is a thrilling player to watch, always has been. There really is a story with every team, and that's a great thing about the NFL. Buffalo, to me, still, and I know their secondary's whacked, but I do think that top to bottom, 1 through 53, their roster is probably as good as there is, at least coming into the season. And here they are with Kansas City at 4-1. They're going to meet this weekend at Arrowhead. So there are great stories all over the place. Rodgers struggling without a main target in Green Bay. The Vikings at 4-1. I mean, every team has got, which is the great thing about the NFL, right? Every team has some kind of story that is compelling. And so quarter of the way through the season with 2/3 of it to go, you'd probably say, what has happened is what was to be expected for the most part. And there's a lot to be written for sure.
Kevin, as an old man who has trouble remembering what he had for breakfast, I'm wondering, how do you balance two sports and do
Yeah.
them so effectively? Where do you find the time, and how do you store all of that?
Well, the NFL is the most difficult job by far because there are roster changes every week, and Michael and Jim, you know this. It's on per play. We have sub packages and offense and defense, and so the personnel's constantly going, in and out of the game. And so from about Tuesday night, Wednesday morning on, almost until I leave for the stadium Sunday morning, I'm constantly watching tape and just trying to make sure that I'm familiar with the players and formations and what they like to do. I am not an expert on the NFL, but in terms of calling it and knowing groupings, I guess I try to make myself familiar with that. And then you just go in. I think there's so much. The one thing that I've talked about with a couple other people is just the information overload is immense. And now that gambling has gotten into this sport and they're almost hand in hand with everything they're doing, now you've got all the fantasy / gambling experts weighing in and offering all kinds of, a completely different set of things that you might want to pay attention to. So that is worth a glance. But I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I love what I do. I try to limit it to these two sports. And I try to be patient with the call. And when I've got that time to study that team, I pour myself into it like you two do. And you just hope and, pray more than anything that you've got enough in your holster to make sure that you come out with everything you can give it. And that is kind of the recipe, if there is one. I love what I do. I don't like the travel. I don't like being away from home, but I do love from the kickoff to the final second and from the tip-off to the final second. I love that. So when you enjoy something, as you two do, the things you cover, it makes it a little bit easier. So I always feel like we get to do the job, not we have to do the job. We get to call the games, and I look at it from that point as a privilege.
Well, I'll tell you what's so fun about you, Kevin, is that you do that. You do it at a high level, but also when there's a light moment, when it's time for levity, you embrace it. I think the last time I saw you was in New York. The last time I talked to you, this was after somebody ran on the field, and you had the call of, "Hey, there's the guy in the red hat is on the field," and I talked to you about it. You said, "Was that okay?" I said, "Yeah, it was fine. It was great." You wanted to. You said it was like a balance between, having some fun, but not necessarily messing with the integrity of the game. And I don't think you messed with the integrity of the game, and you did it again. So what light goes on, or what happens for you where you say to yourself, "All right, I can do this now. I'm going to call this. I'm going to do play-by-play on this crazy moment"?
Well, I did them all on radio, which is one thing. So on radio, you've got a little bit more leeway, I think, and you can explain what you're seeing. And if there is something somewhat circus-like about whatever the person is doing out there, it might be worth something. And I did that many years ago on that Monday night game in Santa Clara. And then it happened again in the Super Bowl. And again, the guys are running on the field and no one's stopping them. I'm like, I don't know where the security people are, because these guys have got the full stage to do whatever they're going to do. I also had the woman who glued herself to the Target Center floor in Minneapolis during the play-in game last year,
Yeah.
which was really strange. Right. And so I guess there's a side of you that feels like you've got to report on it, and then another side of you which feels like, here, this happened the other night. And I wasn't going to call it until the guys came off the bench and drilled the guy, and then and then I couldn't see who it was, because there was this big plume of smoke, and he's out there doing who knows what, and for whatever reason, and that's the other thing you kind of got to watch too, is sometimes these people are so passionate. It's not the right stage to do it, but they're so passionate about their cause, and that happened to be an animal rights person. The woman who glued herself to the floor in that play-in game in the last NBA season, she was doing something about animal rights. And so I think what I've learned is let it breathe a little bit and find out what's going on, and not make a mockery of what they consider an important thing for them. But I have pretty much tried to swear off it. There have been several actually in between all those episodes, whether it was an animal on the field, which you can really have fun with, as they did last night with the goose in Los Angeles, or a person. I think there comes that time when you've just got to say, okay, there's somebody on the field, and we're going to move on to something else. But they're pretty creative, aren't they? I mean, with smoke now and glue, and like there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to try to process from so far away and figure out what's going on.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you something that you may not ever come back on Michael's show after I ask you this. But
here we go.
I'm curious. 38 years as a broadcaster of the NFL, 37 years as a broadcaster of the NBA. You've worked with a lot of analysts. Who's your favorite and why?
I've worked with so many great people, and I would almost hate to say, I'll do it from this standpoint, maybe who I've learned the most from. Can I do it that way?
Okay.
Because
sure.
all of them have been friends, from the late Sam Weich. I just worked with Boomer Esiason, who I used to do Monday night games with. I learned the most basketball with Doug Collins when I worked 7 years with Doug at TNT. I learned something every game, because he played it, he coached it, and he's broadcasted it. And he had such a unique view of the game. And by happenstance, we just connected as friends. And so I always kind of feel, and I've worked with Hubie and I've worked with Bill Raftery, and I love those gentlemen and respect them so much. So I've loved all of them. I really, honest to God, can't say that I've really not enjoyed someone, but I learned the most from Doug. And then football-wise, I've worked with, so many people, Moose Johnston and Jerry Glanville, and like I said, Sam Weich, and just all these different great professionals. But I learned a lot from Rich Gannon and now Kurt Warner in terms of just the preparation that these two kind of rags to riches stories got them to where they were. And it wasn't necessarily early in their careers where they just jumped in and had great success. Rich was a guy that bounced around a little bit, had to find the right environment, found it with John Gruden with Oakland, and the rest is history. He was an MVP after kind of bouncing around the league, and went to a Super Bowl. And then with Kurt, we all know his story very well. Wasn't drafted, small school, 1 year of college starting. Bagged groceries in Iowa, got the tryout with Green Bay, quickly cut as Favre and Ty Detmer and Mark Brunell were there. Landed somehow in St. Louis with the Rams. Had Mike Martz as a coordinator who kind of formed him. Had the time, of course, in the Arena Football League. So what I appreciated about those two was that they took the wherewithal that mentally they had to go through to get to where they got to in terms of NFL success. But they had to work so hard behind the scenes, studying and knowing. They had to know it better than the coaches, both Rich to get to where he got and Kurt. And they've taken that same, Michael and Jim, they've taken that same work ethic and they've extended that to the broadcast booth. And I was just always amazed at everything that Rich had seen and that Kurt Warner sees during these broadcasts leading up to the games. We'll do a game on Monday night. And on the half-hour, 45-minute ride from the hotel to the stadium, he's got a laptop in front of him, and he's charting every play of that game he's watching. And then we go in the booth, and we're 3 hours before kickoff, and now he's on another game, and he's on another game. By the way, on the red eye he's taken, he has watched 2 or 3 games, and he's done some Sunday night before he's gotten on the red eye. So that by Wednesday morning, he has watched every snap of every game and taken notes in his notebook. And I've seen him do it hundreds of times. And I just admire that kind of tenacity. And if I were a fan and I heard both of those guys talking about plays, I've got real trust in that what they say has some real teeth, right? You trust them because they work so hard at what they do.
That's such a good word, trust. I mean, it really
Absolutely.
comes down to the whole fan experience for all of us. There are certain people you trust in that position. I always tell people that when I did my first book on the Patriots, and I saw them up close, I got to tell you, Kevin, I said, their preparation has now altered my preparation. I got to take that's just watching them. Now I got to take my game to another level because this is something I didn't really anticipate. How have you been altered by the analysts that you've worked with?
Well, just their attention to detail, probably more than anything. And like I said, I'm such a fan because I've been in these quarterback meetings when I was a kid, a teenager in Green Bay when I was a ball boy. I've been on the practice field and I've heard all the exactness that needs to go into making one play happen. I've been lucky enough to go to Peyton Manning practices when they would let us come in on Fridays and watch him and Marvin Harrison, pass maybe 30, 35 times one corner route, inside the 12-yard line. And it's just over and over and over again so that it's all not muscle memory, but it's locked in up here, and each knows each step, each portion of that route that he's running, and every moment that he is stepping back in that pocket to throw. And Harrison has got that clock in his head, and Manning's got it in his head. And watching that kind of precision, it is inspiring. I know exactly what you're saying, Michael. When you see somebody in another line of work, and whether it's a player or a coach or the playbook or the diligence with which these guys study, or the way a partner prepares, it is inspiring. And I think all of us that have been in the league covering whatever sports on the national level, as you two do, you're always trying to evolve. And if you're not evolving, as Madden would famously say, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And that is so true. If you rest or exhale, it shows. Now, listen, I am so far from being what I want to be, but I like the challenge every time I put on a headset to try to be better than the last time. And so I'll go over my games and I'll chart my plays and I'll mark the things that are important to me that I picked up. Actually, quite frankly, some things I've taken from the Patriots, Michael, very much like you. And we may have talked about this, or I got it from your book, but I feel like the thing that consistently makes them a difference maker and so consistently good and the same is that these players are so well taught and believe so much in the detailed game plan and never try to go outside the parameters of what they're supposed to do. I write on the top of my boards every game, do your job. That means report. What's the down and distance? Who's in the game? You can equate to what you two do. I do. There are easy ways to do it for me because there are so many things that a play-by-play guy should do. Tell the occasional story, but most importantly, the down and distance and who's in and a statistical update. I'll go back and watch Michaels do a game, and even at his age and as many games as he has done, I take down notes and see things that he does. I go, God, I know it. Like, of course, like what? And so we're all borrowing things we've seen others do, or borrowing things we've seen another profession do that make them so good. And I've got a lot of sayings Belichick has made, and you get a lot of those by former players that are elsewhere. And the reporters in that room will ask these former players for Belichick, what did he do, or what is the Patriot way? And guys describe it. Each of them has the same basic message, but they have different words when they describe it. I always jot them down because there's always something to be learned. So I am a big fan of those grinders is not the right word, but people that are just always on top of the details because no detail is too small and all the small details lead to bigger ones. And so I kind of try to have that lead me.
Kevin, I want to ask you this real quick before you go. As you go back and you listen to your broadcast and you critique yourself and whatnot, is there ever a moment where you say, yeah, I got that one. I nailed that one. Is there one that stands out for you?
Play that Malcolm Butler clip again. That Malcolm Butler one. Come on.
Well, the only reason why that Malcolm Butler is Sports Illustrated, I think, gave the top 5 a couple of years ago, had the top 5 play-by-play calls in a Super Bowl, and they included that Butler play. And the story of that was clearly it came out afterwards that they had practiced it the day before in the walkthrough, right? That Ernie Adams had said, by the way, we haven't practiced this one play that I know that they do, and they practiced it, and so they were ready for it, right? Again, attention to detail.
The quarterback Wilson is in the shotgun formation. Lynch will flank him to his left. 2 wide to the near side, 1 to the far. In the shotgun, there's the snap. It's Belt high. Quick throw. It's intercepted at the goal line. It's intercepted by Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Butler is intercepted Russell Wilson.
Did you catch, Jim? There's the snap. It's belt high. Okay, the details. I love the details. Come on now. That's my stuff. I go crazy for stuff like that. I love that. Okay, I got it. So now I'm driving. I'm not watching. Okay, it's right here. Okay, I got Marshawn Lynch over here. I can see the whole thing. And thanks for the shout out to Joe Tate. Rest in peace, Joe. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, listening.
Oh, of course.
Our TV. Hey, Kevin. Old school, one of those TVs with the rabbit ears. It was very unreliable. So yes. The Cavaliers, they were not good, and they were always on some off stations. Very like 20% of the time, if I watch them, I'm watching through like all the haze. I'm trying to see it. So I'd listen to Joe, and Joe would do the same thing, dribbling with the right hand. He called it timeline, across the timeline. Okay, yes, here he is. Yes. It's just like the whole thing. And he just had that. He just had those pictures. Last thing I have for you, I know you're going to Golden State opening night. What do you expect? A little bit of drama that you're running into, Kevin. I'm glad you missed the craziest part of it, but now you get to see the rebuilding of the trust with the Golden State Warriors. What do you expect there?
Well, I because Steve and I worked together and we did the video game together for many years, 2K video game. He and I are very good friends, and we've been texting back and forth. Not about this, by the way, but just throughout the summer, doing some voice work for the team in their celebration of another championship. But I've always thought, and I'm getting this from Doug Collins now. He said every championship team needs there needs to be kind of a tense atmosphere. There needs to be some aggression, internal aggression. Phil Jackson loved that with the Lakers, Kobe and Shaq, right? I think he played them off more than we know against each other. I think they got it in Chicago. I think he got that with Rodman a little bit and others they would bring in. Not that Steve has fostered maybe some aggression, some intensity off the regular season, but in practice and in those meetings, I think there's always a little, internal tension is not all that bad. Now, hitting the guy is not probably the antidote, but there is something I'm sure that they will find, and they can make that work in a positive way. Steve, to me, is a genius. The way they've constructed the team, the assistant coaches they have, the kind of character they've got, the players that they've won with, the Hall of Fame pedigree that is on their team. And now they're training these other kids that could easily become the next version of those Hall of Famers in the years ahead. It's like genius in the way they're getting it to go. But Draymond Green to me is I love that guy. I've met him several times. He's a member of the Turner family. I should be upfront about that. But clearly he'd be the first, and he has. He's apologized. First thing to swing at a teammate is not the way to handle it. But there's always something I think positive you can find with a little internal combustion and keeping guys on edge. Jackson used to do it with the Bulls and the Lakers. I don't think Steve, but I think now he's going to take this opportunity and try to make the most out of the opportunity and try to spin it as positively as you can. A pretty difficult situation.
Kevin, always great to talk to you, my friend. And you know this, drop by anytime. We've got a key under the mat, but you should have a key already anyway. So don't worry about the key under the mat. You should have a spare key. Come on in, let yourself in. You can go in the refrigerator if you want to get your favorite drink, but come by and talk with us. We always enjoy a conversation.
My privilege. Great to be on with you. Michael, you know how I feel about you, and I've told you several times I'm a fan of what you do. And Jim, I've read you forever. And so I feel like I'm with two old friends here that we've traveled many miles and intersected perhaps from time to time. But having read you both so much, I feel like I know you very well. But it was sure fun to visit, and thanks for having me on.
Much respect, Kevin.
We'll be listening to you, and we'll be watching you. NFL on Sunday in Cleveland, and then going to the West Coast for some basketball. The great Kevin Harlan. Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.